Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to dive deep into a spiritual practice called ascesis, which comes from the work of a thinker named Silo. Now, this is all about a structured way to access some really profound states of consciousness. And it all kicks off with a question you've probably heard a lot, but maybe haven't really unpacked.
Right? You hear this all the time in pop spirituality. Kill the ego, get rid of the self. But according to the source material we're looking at today, if you go into this kind of work with that mindset, you're not just making a small mistake. You're fundamentally misunderstanding how your own mind even works. So let's get this crystal clear right from the get-go. The source material is absolutely adamant about this point. The goal is not to destroy or suppress yourself. That's a total dead end. The real key, the actual gateway to these profound states, is to learn how to temporarily suspend the self. And trust me, that one little distinction makes all the difference. So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to really dig into that crucial difference between suppressing and suspending the self. Then we'll look at what the path of ascesis actually is, what drives it, something called the purpose, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts, the gateway into this state, what you actually find there, and we'll wrap up with a really important warning from Silo himself. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the self. Why is this idea of suspension, not suppression, so absolutely central to this entire practice? Let's break it down. Well, the source material lays it out pretty bluntly. Your everyday self, is kind of like the operating system for your life. It's what structures your sense of time and space. It's what lets you pull up memories, learn new things, coordinate your body. Trying to just delete it would be a complete disaster, basically shutting down everything that makes you functional. So, to be super clear, we're not talking about getting rid of the self. We're talking about a controlled, intentional, and temporary suspension. Think of it like putting your phone on airplane mode. It's a specific action for a specific purpose, to step aside from the mind's normal chatter and access something much, much deeper.
Okay, now that we've got that foundational piece in place, let's move on to our second section. What exactly is this path of ascesis?
Now, ascesis is not some meditation app you use for 20 minutes a day. The source describes it as a lifelong commitment. It's something that becomes the central organizing principle of your entire life, where everything is geared towards this deep internal work. It's a pretty big deal.
And what's really interesting here is that this isn't exactly a beginner's practice. It's designed to build on really significant spiritual or internal experiences you've already had. And it's not static. It's meant to be constantly evolving. You're supposed to perfect your techniques and then, this is key, be willing to completely let them go when they've served their purpose and you're ready for the next step. Okay, so if ascesis is the road trip, what's the engine in the car? How do you actually move forward on this path? Well, the source material is very clear about this. It all comes down to something called the propósito, or the purpose. This is such a cool concept. The purpose isn't something you're actively thinking about during the experience. You prepare it beforehand and you record it with a really intense emotional charge. Then it just runs in the background. It works co-presently. It's like a spiritual autopilot that gently guides the process and nudges the everyday self out of the way so you can go deeper. And if you're wondering what intense emotional charge means, this quote from Silo just nails it. It's not just a casual wish, it's a powerful, undeniable need, just like when you've fallen deeply in love and you just have to see that person. That's the kind of passionate, driving energy that has to fuel your purpose. So we have the path, and we have the engine. Now for section 4, the gateway. Let's get practical. How do you actually start this process? How do you walk through the door? The source uses the word trance. Now, I know that word can sound a little out there, but it's not meant in a spooky way. It's really just a functional term. The trance is simply the mandatory gateway. It's the process of temporarily loosening the grip of the everyday self so you can bypass its usual defenses and open the door to that deeper space. And what's really cool is that there isn't just one way in. As you can see here, different preparatory paths or disciplines use different symbolic gateways. The energetic path might use the image of an altar, while the morphological path uses a portal. The symbols are different, but their function is exactly the same, to kickstart that trance state and get the process going. Okay, so let's say you've done it. You've suspended the self, you've fired up the purpose, and you've passed through the gateway. That brings us to section 5. What actually happens on the other side? What do you find there? And here's where we hit a really fascinating paradox. The destination is this state of vacío, a void, a profound silence. But here's the catch. Because the yo, the part of you that records and remembers things, is suspended, there can be no direct memory of being there. I mean, how can you remember being in a state where the you that remembers doesn't even exist?
So what do you bring back? Well, you don't bring back memories in the normal sense. You bring back what the source material calls reminiscences. You can think of them as echoes or translations, these faint impressions that bubble up as you're returning to your normal state of mind. And the advice here is very, very clear. They fade fast, so write them down the second you get back.
All right, we've arrived at our final and maybe the most important section. This is a critical warning from Silo about the real dangers of getting this kind of work twisted, and it's probably more relevant today than ever. That is a heavy quote, right? Especially coming from 1969. What Silo is pointing to here is a more primitive, less evolved level of consciousness that he says can hijack not just spiritual work, but even big political or religious movements. He calls it the magical consciousness. So what is this magical consciousness? At its core, it's a way of thinking that's born from fear, from feeling powerless against the world. So instead of doing the difficult work of changing yourself on the inside, you try to use rituals and mental tricks to control the outside world, to bend reality to your will. And this lays out the two paths so clearly. On the one hand, you have ascesis, which is all about internal transformation, real discipline, and deeper understanding. And on the other, you have this magical consciousness, which is all about external control, superstition, and is ultimately driven by fear. They might look similar sometimes, but their intentions are worlds apart. And that really leads us to our final question, the one I want to leave you with. If the whole point of this isn't to gain some kind of powers to control the world, as Selo warns against, then what is the real purpose? What is the true point of undertaking such a profound inner journey? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me today.